I suppose you've known about our work in business in the community Ireland for a long time now, and you've just been hearing there that the companies that we work with run programs that put the why of going to school into context for our students. It's part of what we do. Also, we give them great confidence around numeracy and literacy skills through those programs that employees deliver as well, and hopefully make them happier about their skills. But we're going to park the whole education aspect of things just for a little while and come back to the real essence of our country, really, and that's our children and our young people. And there's been massive challenges recently for everyone, but in particular for that cohort. Can you help us better understand what those challenges were?
Yeah, so I guess, well, unfortunately, they're not even finished. They're still continuing. So we still have all these challenges. The biggest one, I think, in the early stages was probably just a real rise in anxiety. So you had an awful lot of children and young people who probably picked up on their parents' anxieties and then had their own anxieties just about the virus and just about, the danger that it represented, if not to them directly, maybe to, loved ones. So if they had extended family who are in those kind of vulnerable categories and so on. So yeah, so I think there's definitely been a rise in anxiety for children. How that's going to play out over the next number of months and even years, I'm not sure, because there's a lot of people now banding around ideas about things like an increase in obsessive compulsive disorder. So you've got a lot of kids now who've got these real germ phobias maybe or whatever, and to be honest, I'm not sure that OCD will necessarily be a bigger problem. But I do think that at some level, children are going to need help perhaps to address this anxiety, because what happens for a lot of us is that we have a specific anxiety about one thing, and then that extends out into kind of a more general anxiety in other areas. So you may find that children just have a higher level of anxiety generally, which could impact in lots of other ways. And so we could see that even in terms of school, and so going to school and anxieties about going to school. And yeah, you've kids now who'll be out of school for maybe up to potentially 6 months, 7 months, and suddenly they're back in a school environment. And if that was potentially a challenging environment for them anyway, gosh, what's it going to be like after having 6 months out? So that's one area, that's the virus itself. And then the other big challenge I think that we have to recognize for our children and teenagers is just the effect of the lockdown. So while the lockdown has been incredibly successful from a public health perspective, and so it's really nailed the virus, it seems, and we've really got that kind of the R0, the transmission rate of the virus, right down, which is good from a health perspective. But then you've got children now who have missed out socially in a big way, and you've children who've missed out educationally. And as Fania was saying there, like, it really does make a difference, the missing of school. So I just did an article there recently, and so I was looking at some of the research about what happens to children and teenagers when they do miss school. And one of the things that they found is that children who miss school generally do worse later in life. So they've looked, there was one study that caught my eye particularly, which was done in Belgium, and so I think it's the French-speaking part of Belgium went on strike, and the Walloon part of Belgium continued sending kids to school, and so they had a really almost direct comparison there, and they found that the kids who had continued in school did better in the longer term. So that's a factor. Now we have, of course, here in Ireland now everybody out of school, and so in theory everybody should be that little bit behind, and so it shouldn't really matter so much. But I think what Fanny was pointing out is true, which is that missing school affects children from disadvantaged circumstances more than it affects children from affluent society. So that means that the kids who are probably in a lot of the schools that you're involved in will actually struggle more potentially, or will be more disadvantaged because of having missed out on this period in school. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on for kids, and I think we probably will only see the real impact down the line as the months and years continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And around that then, do you have any suggestions as to, how do we help? How do we support our children and young people? Because it really is exceptional. And it's great that we can learn from other European countries who are probably slightly ahead of us, but we've got such a unique culture here in Ireland, and community and family is huge for us, and our sporting activities, they're all huge for us, and all of those are missing now. So have you suggestions and tips?
So I guess the biggest thing is to not forget about children's emotional world. So sometimes we focus on the behaviors, so if they're seem very stuck, we try and get them unstuck, or we try and do things with them, or if they're acting kind of, in cross ways, we try and deal with the crossness, as opposed to getting behind that to look at what the feeling might be. And so, again, we know that anxiety might be there for a lot of kids. But I suppose the bit that particularly kind of engaged me when I was just looking at where we're going, and particularly, I suppose, relevant maybe to some of the businesses that you're working with, you've got a lot of teenagers, particularly now, who are going to be very directionless. So they've got, for those who weren't even in exam years, they've had that last 2 months, 3 months really with no great purpose in life. And so, anecdotally, we've all heard the stories of teenagers getting up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the day, staying up till all hours, gaming, whatever, and not really being connected to anything. And I think that's going to prove a really big difficulty for us to try to re-engage that cohort of teenagers, give them back a focus, give them back, I suppose, even some hope or some sense that there's something out there for them. And I think that's the real benefit of something like business in the community, and the way that you can assist the companies to get back into kids' lives. Because, everything that Fanny was talking about there in terms of, the mentoring programs, and it's really about the role modeling even that businesses are going to offer, because we all will require an element of resilience. And I think for our kids, we know that kids are kind of resilient anyway, but we also have to show as the adults that we can be resilient. So there's a lot of companies that would be, pretty much down on their luck at the moment, really maybe even crumbling to the point that they're not sure if they're going to be able to re-engage. And yet they will, because we know that they will, because we know, the economy is going to depend on it. And so there will be, either supports that come externally, but then also the internal resources of the companies, which will probably rely on the people in those companies. They're the ones who are going to show that we can get back up from this position of, real difficulty and actually start creating again. And so it's the way that they will show that they're creating, hopefully the way that they can continue to engage with schools to show kids that there is something out there. Because again, we could almost predict that, with the recession that we're hitting now, that's going to be deep and it's going to be long term. And so in a recession like that, it's going to be very hard for kids who are coming towards the end of their schooling to think, well, what's out there for me? Like, what am I going to do? Like, there's nothing, there's no jobs. I mean, I'm in a position, I have all teenage and young adult children, if that's even a word, a young adult child. But anyway, but trying to find a job now for the summer is almost impossible, because there just aren't the industries there, or there aren't the jobs out there. And so, what do they do? How do they actually build a focus for their day? And I think that's what we as parents need to support them with. But also then, the idea of that might be something for businesses as well, that they can offer us, but just that sense of hope, or that sense that there's something out there that, is a little bit of a longer term goal, something to reach toward, to give our kids a little bit of direction again.
Yeah, that's great, David. And I'm going to talk to you about parenting in a minute, but I just want to echo actually what you're mentioning there about the company employees, because my gosh, over the years, I have met so many people who have been absolutely fantastic, love their jobs, and are sharing that with our young people, and really instilling just being optimistic with students. And actually, just even in the last 2 weeks, I was reading some evaluations that have been completed on one of our programs, actually in Thurles. The company there is Dew Valley, and the reports back from the students whereas that the program made them optimistic about their future. And I was delighted to hear it, and relieved, because the students only filled that in maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, when we were pretty deep into lockdown. But yet what was communicated by the company, and all our companies generally, is that this optimism, that you have strengths, that each individual has strengths, whatever they are. And over the course of some of our programs, that we find out those, we hear them, and everyone, including the teaching staff, turn out to be surprised. So it's great like that. I suppose going back to the role of parents and to adults, I read the statistics. We've gone from 1,495 people homeschooling in December to almost 1 million children being homeschooled now. How does a parent, how does an adult do all that in the midst of everything else that is going on? And if we bring it back to the areas that we work in, the schools that are in the disadvantaged areas, when there's absolute stress about maybe homelessness, living in poverty, money worries, and maybe having to go out to do a job as well as everything else.
Yeah, so maybe I'm going to sound slightly controversial, but I would say you prioritize what's really important. And so, you meet your basic needs first, and education is not necessarily the first priority for a family, where you really have a choice between, do I invest time in my kids now in this, or do I make sure that they've got enough food? Can we pay the bills? Can we, as you say, keep our home in the current crisis? So that's the first priority, I think. you know, there's a difference as well between choosing to homeschool because it's a kind of like a philosophical approach that you just believe in, and then homeschooling by default, which is how most of us have now ended up, that we have kids at home, and we now have to share that responsibility, if you like. And so I think most families would probably say that they've had really good support from their schools, that they've had a lot of discussion, a lot of feedback, lots of work being sent home, and good interaction. But that's not the case everywhere, nor is it the case even that every home or family has been able to access that support that might have been there. And I think in those circumstances, then there's a limit to what parents can do. And I think we do need to give ourselves a little bit of a break, because guilt is a desperate kind of trait for most parents. I think it's easy for us, even when we were back in the olden days and we were working outside the home and our kids were in school, we still felt guilt because there wasn't enough time in the day. And so there isn't any more extra time in the day, and now we have to do this extra job with our kids, and so potentially the guilt is going to be greater. And I would say we can relieve ourselves of that guilt, because in the main, for the most, the majority of children and teenagers, this hiatus in terms of their education, where there hasn't been the same structure and the same interaction as would have been possible in schools, is not going to be a critical loss for them. It will be for some, and so we absolutely, as we come out of this kind of lockdown, we do need to focus our resources on those kids who will have been disadvantaged. But for most of us, because we're just engaged with our kids, because we just chat to them, we read with them, we talk with them, we do so many things as parents that we forget in terms of the development of our kids. We're already educating them. So much of our daily interaction with them is helping them to learn about the world and to learn about the important things in life, not just the stuff that's in the books in terms of academics. And so even in one of my Facebook Live things that I was doing, one of a teacher, a primary school teacher, just added into the chat, that really, if all else fails, just focus on reading with your child. If that's all you can manage, that you read with your child and encourage your child to read broadly and widely, that will sustain them enough that when we get back to more structured formal education, they will be well able to cope. And so, yeah, give yourself a break. Don't worry about the Irish. If you can't speak a word of Irish, don't worry about the maths. They're too complicated. I know you're sorted out there, but the rest of us struggle with some of these concepts mathematically. And so, we just need to give ourselves a break and yeah, just be easy on ourselves and know that, look, it will all eventually pan out. And if we need the extra help down the line, then we can go to the extra help.